Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jhonna, and this is Jhonna Unfiltered. Today's topic is one that I want to be careful about because it touches on something that can be genuinely sensitive for a lot of people. We're talking about INFJ and narcissism, specifically the idea of what a narcissistic INFJ parent might look like. Honestly, writing this script was heavy, but let's dive in. Before I go anywhere near this topic, I want to be very clear about a few things. First, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health professional of any kind. Everything I share in this video is based on research, personal observation, and theoretical exploration. It is not a clinical diagnosis of anyone, including parents, types, or combinations. Second, I've already made 2 other videos in this series. One about whether an INFJ can be a narcissist, and one about the connection between INFJs and narcissistic people in general. So, if you haven't seen those, you might want to check them out for context. Today is specifically about the parent dynamic, which is its own unique and complicated territory. Third, I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who has a difficult relationship with a parent. This video isn't about blaming or labeling anyone. It's about trying to understand patterns that can cause real harm so that the people affected by them can make sense of what they experienced. Understanding is not the same as excusing. And naming something doesn't make it anyone's fault. With all of that said, let's get into it. Let's start with something really important that sets the foundation for everything else. Personality type doesn't cause narcissism. Narcissistic behavior usually develops from a combination of unresolved trauma, deep insecurity, learned patterns from the person's own upbringing, and sometimes other psychological factors. So what we're really looking at today isn't INFJ behavior gone wrong. We're looking at narcissism that happens to be expressed through an INFJ style. And because INFJs have specific traits, their version of narcissism tends to look different from the loud, obvious kind most people picture. The typical INFJ is deeply empathetic, perceptive about people, and values meaning and connection. When those traits are operating healthily, they produce genuinely caring, thoughtful individuals who can be extraordinary parents. But when narcissistic patterns are present, those same traits become tools for something much more complicated. The empathy becomes a way to read and manage people. The perceptiveness becomes a way to know exactly what to say to get a particular reaction. The focus on meaning and purpose becomes a way to control what the child values and believes. That's the core thing to understand. A narcissistic INFJ parent is confusing because the control is subtle. It's emotional. It's framed in the language of love and sacrifice. And because INFJs are naturally good at understanding people, their version of manipulation tends to feel personal in a way that other kinds of manipulation don't. The child often can't name what's wrong because it doesn't look like anything they've been taught to recognize as harmful. Let me go through some of the specific patterns, starting with the mother. A narcissistic INFJ mother tends to use emotional closeness as her primary tool. She's often deeply involved in the child's life. She seems caring and attentive. She might genuinely believe she's being a good mother because she tells herself she's doing everything for the child's benefit. But underneath that involvement is a need for the child to reflect well on her. The child's successes become her successes. The child's choices are evaluated based on how they look from the outside and on how they make the mother feel. And when the child has different opinions, different goals, or different ideas about what they want their own life to look like, the response is often something that sounds reasonable but feels suffocating. Things like, "I just know what's best for you," or "I've sacrificed so much, and this is what you do with it." The child of this kind of mother often grows up feeling deeply understood in some moments and completely invisible in others. They know their mother can read them, sometimes uncomfortably well. But they also know that their own inner world belongs to their mother in some way that's hard to explain. They don't have full privacy over their own feelings. And over time, that lack of privacy turns into a habit of second-guessing themselves because the mother's read on a situation was always presented as the accurate one. Now, let me talk about the father. A narcissistic INFJ father tends to operate differently. He's often more distant emotionally, but still exerts significant influence. His version of control tends to be more about standards and expectations than emotional closeness. He may present himself as a guide, a mentor, someone who sees clearly what the child should become. And he might genuinely care about the child's future. But the version of the child's future he cares about is the one that aligns with his own vision. When the child deviates from that, the response is often cold. Not necessarily loud or aggressive, just withdrawn, emotionally unavailable, as if the child's choices have made them less interesting or less worthy of his attention. This kind of father can use the INFJ door slam as a parenting strategy, even if he doesn't know that's what it is. When a child disappoints him, he simply becomes emotionally absent. No fight, no explanation, just distance. And that distance can feel more painful to a child than any argument would, because it communicates that love is conditional on performance. Now, let's look at how financial situation changes the dynamic. A financially comfortable narcissistic INFJ parent has more tools available for control, and money tends to become one of them. The child may have access to excellent education, material comfort, and every advantage. And those things are real, but they come with an unspoken cost. The parent's generosity is never without expectation. The child is expected to achieve at a level that justifies the investment. They're expected to make choices that protect and elevate the family's image. And if they don't, the resources can be withdrawn or held over their head in a way that makes independence feel financially risky. The child grows up feeling that their life isn't entirely their own, even if they can't point to a specific moment where it was taken from them. A financially struggling narcissistic INFJ parent operates from a different, but equally complicated position. Without material resources to use as leverage, this parent often leans on sacrifice as the primary currency of control. The message becomes, "Look how much I've given up for you. Look how hard this has been." And because the suffering is real in many cases, the child has no framework for questioning it. They just absorb the weight of it. They start to feel that their existence has cost their parent something, and that they owe a debt they can never fully repay. This creates a child who works extremely hard, often out of guilt rather than genuine motivation, and who struggles to believe they deserve good things for themselves without first earning them through suffering. The alcoholic or substance-dependent narcissistic INFJ parent is possibly the most confusing version because the inconsistency is extreme. When sober or stable, this parent might be genuinely insightful, warm, and perceptive. They might have moments of real connection with the child that feel authentic and valuable. But when under the influence, that same perceptiveness can become brutal. This part is uncomfortable to talk about, but it's the truth. Because they know exactly what the child is sensitive about, they're capable of saying things that land with terrifying precision. And the child can't predict which version of the parent they're going to encounter. So they develop a kind of constant vigilance, monitoring the parent's mood, reading the room, adjusting their own behavior to minimize the risk of triggering the wrong version of their parent. Which, incidentally, is exactly the kind of hypervigilance that often produces future INFJs. Let's talk about what happens to the children raised in these environments. They often develop very specific patterns that are both a response to and a reflection of what they experienced. They tend to be emotionally intelligent because they had to be. Reading the room was a survival skill. They tend to mature earlier than their peers because they were placed in adult emotional situations before they were developmentally ready. They're often perceptive about other people's pain and needs, sometimes more sensitive to others' feelings than to their own. But they also carry some consistent struggles. Difficulties setting limits with people because they learned that their own needs were secondary. A tendency to take responsibility for other people's emotional states because that's what kept things manageable at home. A complicated relationship with love and approval because love in their experience was conditional and often came with strings. And a deep uncertainty about their own perception because the version of reality they grew up in was frequently shaped by someone else's narrative. The children of narcissistic INFJ parents also often have a very specific kind of confusion, which is that they can identify the care that was real. They don't want to dismiss the genuine moments of connection, the real sacrifices, the actual efforts their parent made. And they shouldn't have to. Holding two truths at once, that someone cared and also caused harm, is one of the most difficult emotional tasks any person can face. But it's often the most accurate picture of what happened. If you're watching this and recognizing something in your own experience, I want to say something clearly. Understanding that a parent had narcissistic patterns doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you have to cut them off or declare them a bad person. What it does mean is that you're allowed to look honestly at what happened, to stop carrying responsibility for things that weren't yours, and to give yourself permission to build a life that's shaped by your own values rather than by the version of yourself someone else decided you should be. That's not easy, but it's worth doing. Before I close, I want to ask you something. If you're comfortable sharing, have you ever experienced a parent who seemed warm and perceptive but also made you feel like you had to earn their love? What was that like for you? And how did you make sense of it? Drop it in the comments if you'd like to share. You don't have to, but I find that real stories always add something this kind of theoretical discussion can't fully capture. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because, as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I didn't want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I'm Jhonna, and I'm currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I'm Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.